If you lie to the government, they'll put you in prison. But when they lie to all of us, it's called being a politician. You think taking guns away will save our kids from the killings, but you're pro-choice, abortion kills way more children. If America's so terrible and racist, it probably isn't safe to encourage immigration. Just saying, all the contradictions are embarrassing. You know who hates America the most? Americans. But we are all the same. We are red, white, and blue. Ashamed to be American? Okay, that's cool. Because honestly, we are all ashamed of you too.
Y'all are so fake. Oh no. The forecast said that there'd be snowflakes. Whoa.
And we're back once again. Little wide right turn coming your way. Joey Correnti and Tom Kelly joining up once again, sitting back down after about a 2-week break. Been a lot of things going on, a lot of events going on. We're going to talk about Tom's travels, where he's been going, what he's been seeing, who he's been meeting, and what's going on out there in Wyoming. But first, it is getting into that second week of October by the time this comes out. Friday, October 10th is in Roman numerals, 1010. That would be XX. So I want to wish everybody a happy Biological Woman's Day. That's still an important thing. Remember, just because we passed some legislation doesn't mean we've changed the reality in some people's mind. But I always say celebrate the good things. And today, or at least on Friday, I'm going to celebrate biological womanhood, especially the strong warrior women of Wyoming. But with that, got it out of the way. Tom, what's going on? Welcome back, bud.
Yeah, we've had a lot of stuff going on, haven't we, Mr. Prominent Podcaster I saw in Cowboy State Daily. I mean, you're waving that flag around, aren't you? You're becoming an important political analyst in the annals of Wyoming history.
Believe me, they've called me worse, but mea culpa, I did earn just about everything that's been said about me in and out of the paper. So,
well, going from Jailbird Joey to a prominent podcaster and an important political analyst, I mean, you turned over a new leaf there. Actually, no, you haven't. I think maybe I just made you credible, but... All right, enough screwing around. A couple weeks ago, we know that Representatives Karlee Provenza and Mike Yin, the House Whip and the House Minority Floor Leader, have been going around from town to town to talk to people and hear what voters have to say, what their concerns are in Wyoming. And I went to one of these events, and I encouraged everybody I could get who was conservative, moderate, liberal, unaffiliated, uninterested, just to come out and have a discussion of what people are worried about in the community. And I have to say that I highly respect and appreciate what Mike and Karlee are trying to do. And I told them firsthand afterwards that I thought they did a really good job, because they did. They did a fantastic job of having people in the room who clearly didn't agree with one another on things and just be able to talk about issues in a civil manner. Now, there is a downside to it. I'll get into the description of what I saw there, and I'm going to contrast that with the Wyoming Family Aliance Policy Summit I went to about a week after that, which was a very different partisan atmosphere because it was pretty much just all conservatives and conservative Christians at that. But one of the things they are looking to do, which I think they're failing to do, and it's not their fault, is they said they really want to get the pulse of the people of Wyoming. I don't think they're getting that, because the crowd was like 80, 90 people. I think, and most of them might have hit 100, because all the chairs were filled and there were people standing around the edges. We met in Johnson County at a cool little place, but the place was overwhelmingly liberal and Democratic. You could count on one hand how many people who identify as Republican were there. And I think there might have been a grand total of 2 of us that you would consider like conservative / Freedom Caucus caliber, like me and Corn Pop. And he was just there really to kind of cover it. He didn't participate. The other representatives and senators from Sheridan, Marilyn Connolly was there. And Marilyn won't be upset by me accurately saying she's a more moderate Republican. She's happy that she votes with the conservatives about half the time and the moderates about half the time. She's independent, but she's not what we would call the Freedom Caucus wing of the party. You could say I am, because I was invited to join and I was endorsed by them. So that was it. It was a very thin conservative voice at the event. So what were the things we talked about? They were primarily things that the Democratic Party wants to see, which is the minority. It's not, the overwhelming majority of people in Wyoming don't want many of the ideas that they were bringing up there. I mean, some of the no-go things were just like Medicaid for all. We need more gun control. We have to reinstate gun-free zones. We have to ban open carry. We have to expand abortion rights. We need an income tax. These are some of the things they brought up. And it's worth talking and worth hearing so people know that, yes, there are lucid, intelligent people in Wyoming who view the world that way. And they shouldn't be silenced. They shouldn't be shouted down. But if Karlee and Mike are going from town to town and hearing these similar progressive ideas, they're not getting a really clear picture of what's actually on the ground in most of Wyoming. Now, there were some things that came up. There were some topics where we can talk across the board, conservatives and liberals. And number one was the sale of public lands. That was one of the first things that came up. And we obviously can all speak about that. And we have different viewpoints on it. But there are people across the political spectrum who can sit back and just calmly say, it's not clearly a yes or no answer. Do we want our most beautiful and accessible public land sold off to the highest bidder so they can build mansions for billionaires from California? Well, across the political spectrum, it's a big hell no. But also across the political spectrum, you could find people and say, no, wait, it depends on the land. What if it's something that's not largely accessible or not largely used by us? What if it's something the feds are willing to sell off to somebody to do something like, who knows, whatever somebody would want to do out there, put out an amusement park, put up affordable housing for whatever reason. Kind of an it depends answer. So that is one topic that Democrats, Republicans, and independents can all talk about and probably come to some common ground on some statewide policy about how we'd like to present ourselves, at least to the federal government, or what we would like to tell our U.S. congressional rep and senator to do. Another thing that came up, and believe it or not, I didn't bring this up, but Wyophile quoted me as bringing it up because I did mention it. There were people there were Democrats there, who were concerned about how toxic rhetoric has gotten. They were very concerned about how divisive and angry, mean, and sometimes violent things have gotten. That's across the board. Now, I understand we will find people on the left-wing fringes and the right-wing fringes just itching for a fight all the time, sometimes a literal one. But I was a conservative there saying, I agree. That's why I'm here. I want to be able to sit down with people who have publicly stated stuff on Facebook about what a piece of shit I am and sit across the table from me and not loom over them because I'm 6'9" and I'm carrying a Glock because Charlie Kirk was shot not that long ago and I'm going to be careful everywhere I go. But to be able to see the human being sitting across from you and say, now can we talk person to person, not Facebook quip to Facebook quip, which I don't like to do at all. That was a fantastic thing to have come up, and it set the tone for the evening that even though there obviously were some people there that feel in strength in numbers because they were the majority in that room, speaking more boldly of what they thought about conservatives and conservative policies, it was nice to have them attack the policies and not the people. They weren't name-calling. They were talking about how much they hate stupid ideas that I support, like educational savings accounts and allowing teachers to carry in schools. Those are boring ideas to them, and they made it known. But they didn't sit there and call me an asshole and point a finger at me. That's the type of discussion we need to have. And that's why I'll show up and listen when people disagree with me and hear their viewpoint. We talked about water protection because we have AI data centers coming here. And there are ways to bring data centers here that won't threaten our water supply. But they have to be the new age closed-loop cooling system, kind of like a radiator in a car, versus the evaporative cooling systems that use tons and tons of water. Because we may be able to produce the electricity to run data centers through nuclear and through coal and through natural gas and wind power, sure. Not wind power is useless. But we can provide the energy for data centers. But do we have the water for that? And you don't have to be conservative or liberal to realize that water is a scarce and precious commodity in a place like Wyoming. Also, data centers brought up the idea of energy, too. Democrats there were concerned, like conservatives are concerned, and Republicans are concerned, that if the demand for electricity in the state of Wyoming goes through the roof, that our electricity bills will likewise go through the roof. Those are legitimate concerns that go across the political spectrum. They brought up mental health issues. Now, when it comes to policy, conservatives and liberals will likely often have very different ideas on what to do with the policy. But that was a concern among Democrats and Republicans that we have seen an uptick in mental health issues. Something else they brought up that might work, an election day holiday. I think Chuck Gray's even on board with that one. And they don't like Chuck. But Karlee and Mike, again, did a good job of making sure people didn't name names. I guess that didn't go as well in some of the other cities, but Johnson and Sheridan counties did a good job of sticking to the policies. But why not? Why not an election day holiday? I know some businesses are against it for whatever reason, but I don't see why that should be such a contentious issue. Especially working men and women. I know we have early voting, we have absentee voting, but I don't see an issue with that. But if people generally don't want it, then we don't have it. But at least we could talk about that so-called across the aisle, about increasing voter turnout by making it easier to vote on Election Day. And the final topic that came up was affordable housing. And that one, like mental health care issues, we see the same concern, but we have different ideas on how to address it. They want more government intervention, more subsidized housing, more so-called affordable housing, and I would like the exact opposite. Get the government out of it, stop subsidizing housing, stop inflating the prices by putting more government money in the way they inflated prices for healthcare and college tuition. It'll happen with housing, too, if they throw money into it. But that was a concern among liberals and conservatives at these meetings. And we were able to talk about it the whole time, and before I let you jump in there was one thing I thought was kind of funny, because for the most part, I didn't talk a lot. I sat at a table, and I was there with former Senator Bruce Burns, and I was there with several Democratic ladies from around the area. And one of them even apologized to me afterwards. She said she's been really mean to me on Facebook, and said she was glad she got to meet me in person and get to know the man who's actually out there versus, that face you see on Facebook and then all the things you assume about that person based on a couple things maybe they said. So it was a great discussion to have on that. But as we talked about stuff, we would talk about things like things that kept us up at night, future headlines we'd like to see in newspapers. And for the most part, I kind of sat quietly and listened. And I only spoke my ideas when the ladies at the table asked me, what do you think? And I said, well, I was thinking this. And that was it. At one point, they came and they said, well, what do you think about this? Should we go with this one or should we go with that one? And I said, Karlee and Mike already know what I think. They're here to hear what you think. So I'm going to sit this one out. So that was my general demeanor. The end of the event, they're taking questions. It's supposed to only go till 7:30. It's now like 7:45. Questions are starting to dry up. I could tell it's winding down. So I raised my hand and Karlee lets me speak for about a minute. And I thanked everybody there for a great conversation. I thought it was important for them to be there. And I went on to explain about if you want an effective government that listens to constituents, we need a vibrant two-party system. Waste, fraud, and abuse is borne by single-party states, whether it's California, Wyoming, or Cuba. You want a vibrant Democratic Party, and I made a plea for independents who were there. If the Democratic Party makes more sense for you, register and vote as a Democrat. And that's all I really said. That was about it. Thank you for being here. I support a strong two-party system, and I encourage people, if the Democrats make sense to you, be a Democrat. That was it. Got back to me, a Democrat complained that I should shut up and listen more. Speaking for 1 minute at the end of the 1 hour and 45-minute event was too much for one of the Democrats that was there. I'm like, so not everybody shared the sentiment. We were all there to represent our communities and speak to one another. But that was one of those moments I just had to laugh it off. I'm like, wow. Okay, yeah, maybe I might have gone over to 70 seconds. Who knows? But overall, I appreciate what they're doing. Mike and Karlee are doing a good thing going across the state, getting people who don't feel like their voices are heard a chance to be heard by representatives. And I've heard people on the right, their real motivation is to just get people to be Democrats. And I said, yeah, and I'm there to help them. Because if there are liberals in the Republican Party, it makes more sense that they're in the Democratic Party. If we have more Democrats in Wyoming, it doesn't mean we're going to have more liberals. They just won't be voting in our primaries. They'll vote in their own primaries. That's a good thing for a two-party system. So I'll give it a break there before I go on to the Wyoming Family Alliance. But hats off to Karlee and Mike. I really appreciate what they're doing. And it gave me a very different perspective from going to like conservative events or Sheridan County Patriot Chats, where I hear the opposite end of the spectrum only.
I haven't been to any of those. They haven't come my way and haven't been locally available when I have been traveling. But from what I've heard, and I have talked to Mike Yin, I haven't talked to Karlee Provenza about it yet, but it really is, I think it's the basic service of governance, getting out and talking to the people. I've heard all of the pushback from many people. Oh, they're just running around. They need to stay in their district and stay in their lane and stay in their party. Well, Mike Yin says it at just about every single one of these things, and I hear him say it quite often. I may represent my district and be affiliated with my party, but I have to make decisions in the legislature that affect every single Wyomingite and the state of Wyoming. So it doesn't hurt, shouldn't hurt, for me to go out there and just listen to people. And I do like the way they have it set up, kind of the round tables, everybody talking to each other, not being talked to from the front. It's very different than most quote unquote Republican conservative events I go to, where it's one person or group at the front talking to and then maybe taking questions, but still regulating the audience participation or actually listening. It's just a monologue to the point where you almost think there's planted questions out there. So I appreciate what they're doing. I don't get the posture on both sides, the Democrats that are in these meetings or talking about them and the conservatives, Republicans, whatever. Is this like every time we go outside, it's supposed to be like the Warriors or West Side Story? Anytime we see someone of a different ilk, it's, let's rumble, come on, man. I don't get it. I don't see why we can't come together and talk, even though we disagree. And even the conversation about talking tends to be problematic. Oh, they're just doing this. Well, then don't show up. Let them make the effort. As far as I'm concerned, it's an effort at good governance and understanding. And last time I checked, we have the right to peaceably assemble. We have the right to exchange ideas. So anybody who's got a real problem with it really needs to look at, are we upholding the principles espoused in our Constitution, saying, hey, I might not like them, but good for them getting together and getting out in front of the people. I just don't get the concept of, in Wyoming, no other voices can exist. We're not going to participate, but they shouldn't be doing that. Or these people aren't allowed to come outside, the freedom to travel and associate and assemble, just to listen and learn and engage. So I don't get it. But of course, I haven't been to one of those. I would love to go to one and do what you did, kind of just be there, observe, participate when asked. But it's just hearing the voice and realizing that you are in something of an echo chamber, as you found out with your friend at the end there. People are always more comfortable in the echo chamber, but I don't understand what the heck are you doing here? You took too long response for you at the end was. It's kind of the same. It was weird backlash that came when Mike Yin went to the state central committee meeting because it happened to be in Jackson and people were freaking out. What Mike Yin doing here? Well, Mike Yin's involved in politics and we're in his town. It's neighborly to come on over and we're open to the public. So I think we definitely need to calm down a bit on that who's where, who's doing what, and if I don't like it, I have to say or do something about it because it's what leads into some of these other things we've been seeing. The threatening, the violent actions, it all starts somewhere, and I think it starts in that expectation of that echo chamber. But you're absolutely right. I don't believe we need a vibrant two-party system. I think we need a vibrant multi-party system, but let's eat the elephant, quote unquote, one bite at a time. A two-party system that's vibrant and self-sufficient on their own as two separate entities. Hey, yeah, if we got to start there, let's start there. I think the Democrat Party has a lot going for it, and the Republican Party will have a lot more going for it if we have that honest, effective, dare I say, grassroots Democrat Party in Wyoming. But I do know there were other things happening across the state, one that you attended, a couple that we heard about. But why don't you tell us what was going on down there with the Wyoming Family Alliance? I heard Nathan Winters put on quite the shebang over the weekend.
Yeah, he's a hell of a nice guy. He kind of reminds me of Mr. Rogers in some ways. But I didn't know him in the legislature. I've just met him through the Wyoming Family Alliance. That organization has been incredibly friendly to me and my family. They did endorse me when I was running, and I barely even knew who they were at the time. They met down in Cheyenne for the Policy Institute as we talk about specific bills that are on the table and issues that are hitting the legislature at that point. And they tend to be a heavily pro-life group. But it's not only abortion when we're talking about those things. I was not going to attend because I'm driving all over the state. They just called another recalibration meeting coming up in a couple of weeks in Casper. I'm going to be in Judiciary in Cheyenne soon, so I keep driving all over the place. And the last thing I wanted to do was put in another 8-9 hours of driving for a fundraising dinner where I could always just check in online. But they invited me to go, and then they offered me a free ticket to go. And that's not enough for me to go. And then they invited my wife. Even still, I'm like, we've got my little buddy Kane. But they knew of Kane. So they said, there's a free ticket for you, your wife, and your wonderful son, Kane. And when they said that, they sold me. I'm like, all right, I'm going. They invited my little guy to go.
They probably went the long way around just to get Kane there, which was the focus in the first place. We want the kid up in the gallery with the hands. We want him.
Right, dancing around. Like Kane's new thing is to walk around and talk in a gruff voice and put on my jacket and say, "Hi, I'm Tom Kelly." He introduces himself, everybody's me. But we went down there, and these were the four main issues we talked about during that time. Nathan Winters did share that the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder flipped a switch in him. That, he's always been a Christian, but he didn't quite lead with it the way Charlie Kirk did. He didn't wear it on his sleeve so much. And he felt maybe it was more important now to never, ever be ashamed or afraid or intimidated to let people know that's where he was coming from. So he was speaking about that. Harriet Hageman spoke for a while about what's been going on in the country. It was good to see her. She's the only member of Congress who hugs me when she sees me. But the actual summit itself is what I'd like to talk about, because dinner was just hanging out. I got to sit next to Lee Filer and talk about things because he was there with his wife. Rob Geringer was at our table. Protecting parents from government overreach was one of the themes that they brought up. And people ask, what is that? Well, government overreach tends to be things about like family services or public schools or public school counselors doing things with your kids that you wouldn't approve of without your knowledge. And that this is classic, one of those issues where the knee-jerk reaction is, that doesn't happen in Wyoming, even though we have instances of that happening in Wyoming. And when it becomes a normality, sometimes those instances, like in places like Colorado and Washington and California, become law, where the state is expected to intervene in your child's behalf without your permission or your approval when they think you're not parenting the right way. So when we're talking protecting parents from government overreach, it was really a hard stand in favor of the nuclear family. Imagine that, the Wyoming Family Alliance, against this concept of it takes a village, they're all our children, or as we deride it, co-parenting with the government. So that was one issue. Another one was children's content in the school libraries and in the public school libraries. We've been kicking around this issue for a while. They had the guy there from the Idaho Family Policy Institute who led their library bill there. One of the contentious issues that's coming up in judiciary is that we've got this bill that's got a potential $50,000 fine for one violation of the bill. I stood up at the Wyoming Family Alliance, and it was really the only time I spoke, and I asked a question when they were up on their panel. I said, here in Wyoming, I think we're running headlong into a political wood chipper. Our number is $50,000. And I know we're going to get crucified on the idea that we just want to shut down rural libraries with this threat. The bill you passed into law has a penalty of $250. Is it effective? And he laughed. He goes, yeah, it's $250 is kind of a joke, really, when you think about the monetary value. But what it really comes down to is the fact that you might have to defend yourself against a lawsuit. That's the deterrent. You don't need this giant number. I just turned and looked at everybody I've been arguing with about this, like, there you go. So that was one of the moments. I'm like, thank you. That's all I needed to hear. But that was one of the issues about how do we have some guidelines and regulations, but most importantly, a mechanism for parents to exercise their parental rights when you have local libraries saying, no, we think your kid should be reading this book as gay. Because that does happen. You do have people who are out there saying, we don't care what the parents think. Your kids need to be exposed to kink. They need to be exposed to teenage sex. If you won't teach your kids about what 13-year-old boys like to do with themselves, then we'll teach them with your public dollars. Well, mostly across the board in Wyoming, the knee-jerk response is, hell no. It's up to parents to decide what their kids are looking at. A lot of the blowback we get on the library bill is, you're banning books. The government's deciding for us, not the parents. No. There's not a single book that's being threatened to be banned. What we're looking at here is having these guidelines and an appeal system and a way for parents to approach a library that's uniform across the state to say, this little boy blowing another little boy shouldn't be in the kids section. And you don't take it out of the library, you just reshelve it into the adult section. It's that simple. So that's a lot of what we talked about. And I did have people come up to me and talk to me afterwards that they had listened to like you and me on the show and heard our points about this idea of threatening to throw librarians in jail for allowing kids to see this stuff. And to hear the reason about who the hell's going to want to be a librarian when you might end up going to jail for a book that was put on the shelves 3 years before you were hired you didn't know about. So we make some headway having these discussions with people who disagree with us. And we're seeing more movement from people realizing that it wouldn't be such a bad thing to have a closer look at what is actually making its way into the children's libraries. Now, digital libraries, that's a whole different animal. But that was the second topic. Third topic is continued concerns with DEI, mostly at the university. And this is what I told people. When they were looking to ban CRT, critical race theory, I said, they'll just call it something else and keep teaching it. And you look to ban DEI, well, they just call it something else and they keep teaching it. The discussion on that is basically, how do we get this garbage out of our university and have them start teaching critical thinking again versus teaching left-wing ideology? Because that's all DEI is. DEI is non-thought. It's indoctrination. It really is. It's basically, this is the worldview that there are the oppressed and the oppressors. The United States is a white supremacist patriarchy, and if you disagree, then you're not only racist and sexist, you're transphobe. We'll just throw that in there too. But DEI is an issue at the University of Wyoming with courses like, I forgot what it is, but it's like diversity in politics or something. I looked it up a long time ago, but it's still there. So that's an open discussion about how do we influence our public state-funded university to spend money the way that most Wyoming taxpayers approve. Because I know people on the left are like, no, we think this is a great idea. We wish everybody was like California. We push this garbage. Most people in Wyoming don't want that. But there are people like me who don't want the state dictating curriculum either. Because that's not academic freedom. That's not a state of liberty. We can go back and forth about, well, if we're funding it, I'm like, I get it. There are some things I don't want to fund. When the state defunded DEI at the university, I was all for that. There's no reason the state should have to pay for something like that if the majority of the people don't want it. But when the university started getting private contributions to keep those activities going, and then the state wanted to put a ban on that, now I've got an issue with it. So these are the types of discussions we have there. And the last one was addressing challenges with school discipline. This has come up in the education committee. So I'm on the forefront of all these issues. Maybe that's why they wanted me there. You're right. They wanted Kane there. Nobody wanted me there. But he's a walking party. It can't be dull when he's there.
And I've seen the ladies love him, too.
Yeah, and you could see his response to it, too. That was totally natural. Like, hey, what do you think of these lovely ladies? And he's like, oh, my God. You saw the picture. It's on my Facebook if anyone wants to see it. But the issue with school discipline is that one of the things making teachers miserable is that kids are just coming in less and less prepared to function socially in a public setting. Kids refusing to follow instructions, refusing to listen to other kids, being disruptive, getting sent out of the classroom, getting sent back to the classroom with a sucker and a smirk. And a lot of teachers feel like their administrations are not backing them up. I've heard a lot of people hide behind the whole IEP thing because federal rules, least restrictive environment, when somebody has an IEP, that you have to put up with their bullshit. No, that's not true at all. I dealt with special education in Colorado and Illinois, two of the most liberal states in the country, and they handled it better than Wyoming does. Because yes, there are federal rules, but what you cannot do is discipline a child for behavior that is directly related to his or her disability. Now, like if a kid has, let's just use the stereotype of Tourette's. Kid yells an F word who has Tourette's, you can't punish that kid for having Tourette's. However, if the kids can't learn in the classroom because the kid keeps yelling mother every 30 seconds, you can then remove the child from that classroom, not to discipline and punish that child, but to teach that child in what is the least restrictive environment where they could actually learn. And a child who's constantly interrupting class by belting out profanities that they can't help is interrupting the education of all the other kids, and they're probably not learning because they're probably embarrassed if it's a tick and they can't handle it and people are laughing at them or telling them to shut up. So that's one example right there. So you can discipline children on individual educational plans. You can discipline children who are special education. You just can't punish them for stuff they can't help. That's all that really means. That's how that's been interpreted. So we'll be looking for ways to encourage administrators to back their teachers up to be able to remove disruptive kids from the classroom, especially those who don't have IEPs. And maybe if I'd had my way, we could encourage some districts not to be so quick to write up an IEP for a kid who's belligerent, because you do then sometimes tie your own hands. Every kid who's undisciplined doesn't have oppositional defiant disorder or some behavior disorder. Sometimes they just have what I used to call NDS when I was in special ed, and that was no dad syndrome. They just didn't have a male role model that showed them how they should behave at that point. And quite often when they had that at the school, they were fantastic. I'm still friends with some of my former students. They're in their 30s now. And they grew up in systems where their father was missing or absent in some other way, even if he was in the household and not doing the duties he's supposed to be doing. So those are the 4 issues of the Wyoming Family Alliance. It was much more on policy than it was on atmosphere and what we'd like to talk about. But here's the part that tied it together. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And the sparkle of hope that I had, through no coordination of their own, both Nathan Winters and Karlee Provenza proclaimed at the beginning of these events how important it is to love your neighbor. They both quoted the Bible to start things off. Even if Karlee didn't mean to quote the Bible, she still did. And even if for those of you people on the right say, I don't trust her because 2 years ago she put up a goofy meme with a guy in a dress with an AK-47, which she got embarrassed by and apologized for and was called out on the floor of the House for it, you can hang on to that from 2023 all you'd like to. All I know is in 2025, she went out of her way to engage people all across the state with sincerity and pushing a message of love and cooperation. And if people want to deride that as the kumbaya moment, you need to know Karlee a little bit better because she's no doormat. She will stand up for her principles, and she and I will butt heads on the floor. We have in the past, and we will again in the future, but we will do it without being assholes to one another. And that is what I really took away from both the Wyoming Family Alliance, way in the conservative end, and the Democrats of Sheridan County all the way on the left end came with the same message of let's just start being nicer to each other again. That's what makes me hopeful. And I'm a little disappointed by people on the right and the left who grit their teeth and say, I want to fight. Maybe we'll send you guys out to a cage match somewhere. But most of us in Wyoming, we're sick of the constant bickering. We're sick of looking to win fights rather than solve problems. And solving problems doesn't necessarily mean compromising principles. If I ever compromise a principle, somebody please call me out on it if you think I have. And we'll have a discussion on it. And if I'm wrong, I'll admit it. I'll do that. But I can't take this anymore that we can't speak to people who disagree with us because they might somehow infect the purity of our thought. I take that as an insult when people are like, you're going to talk to those liberals? You're going to talk to those Democrats? Oh, my God. What if they change you? Well, that would be miraculous because considering the history of my life, constantly doing things I was told I couldn't do, including, Joe, you remember this one? You better get a haircut. You're not going to get elected with long hair. Remember that one?
Classic. Yes, I do remember. I still remember the stress I was feeling as I was being told that I needed to be part of that conversation with you as well. I'm like, all right, all we can do is ask. But this is Tom Kelly, so he can do a lot worse than say no. Normally the standard is the worst they can do is say no. But yeah, I remember that. And going back to your cage match answer, it's like I said before, it's the West Side Story. Let's rumble. That's all they want. It's almost like they want that fight. But in both the examples I gave, the Warriors and West Side Story, that struggle and the vitriol and the division and the violence that happened only mattered on their block, only within their little group or their two little groups that were really close to each other. The further and further back you got and looked at the neighborhood as a whole, the city as a whole, the state as a whole, whatever, their little squabbles that they're ready to go to death for didn't matter. And I think that's another component of this, of how important is this to do this way right now. And what is the result going to be? Is there an actual benefit, or did I just bark somebody down into a corner that they're eventually going to come out of anyway without solving anything? So I do like the fact that Karlee did that. I'm not surprised. If you listen to her, she talks about not only her expectation or her awareness of the expectation that we love thy neighbor, but her struggles with it, how difficult it is in a lot of situations to just be that person. And again, I'm pretty sure she knows that's a biblical principle, but I would be surprised if she quoted chapter and verse from the Bible.
Yeah, she didn't call it out. And not even Nathan Winter did, but, you know, he knew his audience, that everybody knew what it was anyway.
Yeah, the one thing I heard that came out of that, you said there was a visitor from the Idaho Family Policies Alliance?
Some name like that. I don't remember the exact name of it.
It's basically Idaho's version of our group here, Nathan Winter's group here. And,
Right.
you know, I've had people reaching out to me and sending me messages, and someone sent me a cell phone video and said, hey, why don't we do this? And I'm like, I've been trying. I know a lot of people have been trying, but this guy laid out the consideration for legislative effort, and it's just three pretty easy things. The first one was being prudent. Is it politically prudent? Is it plausible? Is it passable? Can you get enough support behind it because it's a good, principled, well-written bill? Not just, we know we have a majority, so we're just going to pass an idea that's actually bad legislation because we know we have a majority. The other one is it effective? Does it do what you say it's going to do? Can you enforce that type of thing? And then the third one, is it legally defensible? Because a lot of our big ones right now get tied up in court, either on the creation of the law side or the way the law ends up getting applied. And I was kind of surprised people, maybe they just needed to hear it from an outside voice, but that pragmatism in that process for legislation is kind of something I've been talking about for a while. I know you're in the same boat of, yeah, I get it. I know we need to deal with libraries and schools and books and all this other stuff, but not like that. And so I was inspired and comforted by the fact that people reached out to me with that information from that meeting or that summit you were at, pointing to the out-of-state guy saying, this guy's got revolutionary ideas. Well, I'm glad you finally caught it, but whatever it takes, yes, I think we definitely need to start looking at being more prudent, being more effective, and being more legally defensible in our creation of legislation. And that may help tone down a lot of the rhetoric and the vitriol amongst people, because when you just have an idea that doesn't have solid principles behind it, and the language in the bill is bad and so easily debatable, that's when you get people running into the factions, the groups, the West Side Story thing. You know, you got guys on each side ready to rumble because they don't understand the principle. They can't defend it without feeling attacked. And what we need in Wyoming is good, enforceable policy.
At the correct level as well.
Too true. Don't even get me started because I won't.
Yeah, we won't get started on the local control thing. But that's what it comes down to also. And that's why I had misgivings originally about the library bill, the initial one, that we were going to override the decisions of all school libraries, all local libraries. And what we're coming up with now in judiciary is basically going to be a state level foundation. And then ultimately 90+% is going to be left up to the local governments again, which I can live with that. But we've got recourse for the parents. If their local governments blow them off, now they can get sued if we get that through. But, you know, there's something I want to shift gears here a little bit, because we talk about the political divide, and there's still a lot of finger pointing going on, and still people out there saying stuff. I will never have empathy for Charlie Kirk. It's like, great. You've already tagged yourself as an asshole. We know that. But something that I've brought up that some people just don't want to admit, and that is that the left has become very comfortable with the idea of political violence. Some people even call them like the assassination party now. That when Donald Trump had a piece of his ear taken off, they were actually disappointed that our country wasn't thrown into complete turmoil because his head had gotten blown off. And those same people literally dancing and laughing and celebrating demonically as somebody got murdered in front of his family. And they think somehow that that's justifiable because he doesn't think men belong in the women's bathroom, or because he thinks abortion is wrong, or he thinks you'd be happier if you're married, which he was correct about. So I had to pull up these numbers for some people. And there's a very recent poll on this. And it has to do, when they asked people, is political violence ever justified to achieve a political goal? And it was broken up on 5 levels of conservative, right to left. And get these numbers. 3% of very conservative people said, yes, violence can be justified to get your politics across. 3%. Of conservatives, 6%. Double the amount who call themselves conservative. That's a little concerning. 6%. 3 out of every 50 people think it's okay to shoot somebody if they disagree with you politically to get your point across. But it gets worse. 9% of moderates. 17% of liberals. And of those who identify as very liberal, 25%, 1 out of every 4 left-winger you meet is okay with your head being blown off if they disagree with you politically. That's incredibly disturbing. And I saw people knee-jerk go, well, that's a poll. I don't trust polls. That's funny hearing liberals say that after they trusted them forever. But this poll is done by YouGov. YouGov is not known for leaning in a conservative-friendly manner. Just to give you an example, some recent political polls we have here right now, I have Insider Advantage, Donald Trump approval ratings, approve 52, disapprove 46. Rasmussen Reports, approve 46, disapprove 52. RMG Research, approve 51, disapprove 48. You can see he's right around the 50-50 mark with these different polls. YouGov, 43-54. He's underwater 11 points on YouGov. And he's always way underwater on YouGov. YouGov always overestimates support for Democrats. So this is the group that does not want the liberals looking bad, and their numbers still came back. 1 out of 4 very liberal people consider themselves, well, violence is okay if I disagree with you. And not only that, 14% said they're not sure. 6% said they'd prefer not to say. Only about half of very liberal people said, no, it's not okay to kill people if you disagree with them. That's stunning. It's closer to 90%. 88% with very conservative said it's never okay to hurt somebody because you disagree with them. Only about half of very liberal people said that. That's a serious issue in this country right now. That left-wing ideology, and we could talk about this for another hour or so, maybe we'll dive into this next week, about how this secular, atheistic, humanistic worldview has continuously cheapened the value of human life down to the point where fellow human beings are nothing more than NPCs in a video game to be eliminated when they're a pain in your ass, not human beings. And the reason I am so happy that even after, despite the crap she took for putting up that meme 2 years ago, that Karlee has got the courage and the intelligence to go traveling the state with her friend Mike, and the two of them could stand up there and say, we're Democrats, we want to hear what everybody here has to say, and talk about it. And to preface it all, let's just love and respect one another. And drop this idea that it's okay to open fire on people because they said something you don't like. Too many people out there, and I know some of you listening to me right now, think it's okay. And there are a couple of you on the right, I know personally, have dehumanized people on the left. They're demonic, they're baby killers, they're groomers, they're pedophiles. Yeah, you could find people like that. You could find people like that all across the political spectrum. But we used to just call them evil, not liberal. I'll let you join in on that. But really, we have to understand that this is not an even both sides thing. Without a doubt, the left has become much more bloodthirsty and violent than the right has. That's a provable fact. And being on the right, yeah, it makes me a lot more uncomfortable.
I think it's a legitimate concern. I get that there is evidence of this being a heavier on the left issue. And honestly, I'm not surprised. Just the way we've raised a certain generation to not be accountable, to not take other people into consideration. We've removed personal responsibility. Yeah, I get it. But, you know, on the flip side, I'm going to have to do a little cover my ass here because I actually got called out for it again this week, 5 years later. I don't agree with political violence. I don't agree with violence at all. And I wasn't even talking about violence, but got called out for putting somebody in the hospital at the 2020 convention. I will caveat that with self-defense. My same thing of I'm pro-life. Actually, I'm pro-innocent life with exceptions. You break into my house, you're threatening the safety of my family. Hey, I believe in your right to live, but I'm going to respect the fact that you don't believe you have the right to live because of your actions. I didn't kill anybody, but yeah, it's the same thing. And that brush, it's pretty broad that people paint with. And then that goes back into the division and the factions. Well, someone on the left did this, so screw Mike Yin and Karlee Provenza. Well, it also wasn't Mike Yin and Karlee Provenza. We on the right also, I believe, we stand for things like personal responsibility, due process of law. And yes, it's unfortunate, and I'm sure there is some responsibility to be shared up and down the aisle of each side of the aisle. But, that's why the show's called Just Blame Joey. If you're worried about fault and finger pointing, okay, point it at me. When you're ready to solve the problem, let's solve the problem. When it comes to Charlie Kirk and the reaction, I know this is going to sound a little self-serving and maybe get me in a little more trouble with some of our regular listeners, but honestly, I'd say look at everything you've been seeing the last month, whatever you've been dealing with, hearing, processing, whatever, and then take a minute and go listen to Amy Edmonds' podcast. She's just about wrapping that up because she is now the governor's new communications director. I guess being a influential podcaster does pay off in Wyoming. They called me and I said, no.
Nah, they didn't call you. You're tainted with your affiliation with me. I'm one of the bad guys.
Yeah, no, I'm proud of Amy. It's an honor regardless of your feelings about the governor. That's an important job. But yeah, she's got a podcast out there. She does it weekly. I don't know what the future of it's going to be, but this past week, last Friday, on Let's Talk Wyoming, she interviewed Bo Beitman specifically on his friendship and his take on the Charlie Kirk issue. Charlie and Bo knew each other for years, all going back to 2012, 2014, something like that. And listening to what Bo has to say and just the reality of we're all countrymen, we're all brothers and sisters, a lot of the things you and I have been talking about tonight, I think everybody should at least give it a listen. Even if you're going to give it a listen to poke fun and prove once again you're still an asshole, whether it's legal or not to be an asshole, there's an understanding in there. And Charlie was very faith forward. Charlie was very honest. You didn't have to agree with him, but he did one thing that not a lot of other people are doing that we started the show with is he's always willing to hand that microphone to somebody else and say, let's talk about this.
Well, that's definitely something I'll have to give a listen to on that. I have to admit, when it comes to the aftermath of Charlie Kirk, I started tuning it out just because it turns my stomach every time I hear it and I think about it. How ugly some of the things have gotten right now. I see people going publicly, like ripping on Erica Kirk because she's not mourning the way they think she should. I can't even get into stuff like that. Some of the things I think we should talk about next week, though. It's some stuff I was looking at here in case we got into it, but we're not going to get time to get into it, is what makes younger generations conservative or liberal, and how much of it has to do with social media, how much it has to do with socialization, public schooling, and how much of it has to do with biology. Some of these studies you see now that conservatives not only more likely to be happy, but more likely to have higher levels of testosterone and be physically stronger as well. I think we could probably ruffle some feathers making fun of the soy boys and the beta males because there's a lot of truth to that men who are slightly anemic and lacking in muscle tend to lean left. But that also has a lot to do with the younger generation having issues with dating, having so many women in childbearing years now don't have kids. And some of that is because women are choosing not to have kids, but some of that is because women can't find decent men on the other side of it too. So we should have a whole discussion about that next week, about the whole parenting thing. And I don't know, we're both Gen X. Maybe we could pick on Gen Z a little bit too.
Yeah, I'm 100% for that, while also taking responsibility for setting up the playing field for which these kids ended up in this situation. I'm always really big on that. It goes all the way back to the boomers. We did and didn't do some things that have brought us to this. And we say it all the time on this show. Whatever we recognize, whatever we theorize, whatever we prove, we also have to look at the timeline in which it took to bring it on. That's probably at least the equivalent amount of time it's going to take us to go back. But we really need to start heading back the other way. There's another generation coming up behind them. I don't even know what they're called. That's the millennials, the Gen Zs. And with all this stuff you're talking
I think it's Generation Alpha. They just turned it over and started over at A is all they're doing with that.
I guess. But
we're not getting very innovative as far as that comes to. But yeah, there was something I just saw on Bill Maher's show. He was talking about young women. It was like 72% of Gen Z women, a little preview for next week, consider their mental health challenges as an important part of their personal identity. That's what they lead with. I don't know how you meet a good man when you're like, hi, I'm crazy. And I know that some people say, well, Tom, that comes across really callous. You're downplaying mental health issues. No, when you say that to an 18, 19-year-old man with you lead with, hi, I have bipolar disorder, that's a red flag. Really, I don't meet people, I'm like, hi, I'm Tom. I have autism, I have rheumatoid arthritis, and Hashimoto's disease. My physical and mental issues are not my identity. It's part of who I am. It's part of what I have to deal with. But I wouldn't say that my rheumatoid arthritis is an important part of my identity. No, it's a pain in my ass or sometimes fingers I have to deal with. But that is what I'd like to get into, because when you are a young lady leading with, oh, I'm neurodiverse and I have post-traumatic stress disorder, and somebody's like, okay, well, next. Because if that's your best, that's what you're leading with, typically we put our best foot forward. And if your best foot forward is that you have all these mental health challenges, that's probably why you're not getting a second date. Yeah, okay, we'll talk dad to dad next week on this one.
Yeah, I'm already thinking like a capitalist going, yeah, let's do it. I'm going to get the website www.I'veGotThat2datinginanneurodiverseworld.com going and hook these kids up based on their perceived mental deficiencies. That's one way to do it. Got to make that.
Yeah, maybe get my daughter back in on this one. Just say, hey, what's it like to be 20 years old right now with men out there? I'll give her, if Lily wants to get on her and give a chance to say something, maybe we should do that. Speaking in from Nashville, see if she wants to. I'd love to hear her voice on that, even though I already know what it is. She's kind of really disappointed of how many man buns and Uber Eats, Netflix watching, THC gummy eating guys are out there.
Yes, the betas. I'm lucky. I'm a gamma male. I'm not even an alpha, so I'm in a totally different game. But that is definitely something we will talk about next week. And beyond that, let's see, we got a lot of meetings coming up over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Tom, I'm going to see you over there in Judiciary. And then somewhere around the end of the month, I think we got another recalibration meeting. But keep an eye on the Capitol between the 13th and the 18th of October. You got Judiciary, some budget committee meetings, gaming, labor, transportation, management, audit. It's all happening, and these are the last meetings where they're going to either propose and pass legislation to move on into the session or let it die on the table. So stay aware, Wyoming, and if you happen to be at any of those meetings and you see me or Tom, stop, say hi, and remember, we're not from the government, but we are here to help.
If you lie to the government, they'll put you in prison. But when they lie to all of us, it's called being a politician. You think taking guns away will save our kids from the killings, but you're pro-choice. Abortion kills way more children. If America's so terrible and racist, it probably isn't safe to encourage immigration. Just saying, all the contradictions are embarrassing. You know who hates America the most? Americans. Trigger warnings used to be on TV for seizures, and now they're everywhere to protect millennials' feelings. He, she, his, him, hers, them, they. Screw a pronoun, cause everyone's a retard these days. I hear him preaching at the protest that hatred's the problem, but hating straight men, white folks, and Christians is common. Coca-Cola telling people they should be less white. They preach intolerance, but if you disagree, they fight. There's a race war here, elections based on fear. Black lives only matter once every 4 years. Soldiers died for this country, and every one of us benefits. Give welfare to the bums and forget about the veterans. Black folks and white folks divided by the news, but we are all the same. We are red, white, and blue. Ashamed to be American? Okay, that's cool. Cause honestly, we are all ashamed of you too.
Y'all are so fake. Oh no. The forecast said that there'd be snowflakes. Whoa. You can make us see it your way. No way. Gasoline and propane. More flames. Oh no. No more snowflakes.
They set us up to fail, that's what they built the system for. Put an ammunition shop across the street from a liquor store. Empowering women used to be different than this before. The role models got OnlyFans or dance on a stripper pole. Screw it, I ain't tripping, I don't mean to be mean, but if our children are the future, then our future is bleak. They take an Adderall to focus, hit McDonald's to eat. They're addicted to phones and they take Xanax to sleep. They blurred the lines dividing communism and democracy. In 2021, we paint the patriots as Nazis. The men playing women's sports get trophies for winning. Like, great, let's celebrate a man for beating some women. If you're black, your life matters, you're supposed to embrace it. If you're rich or you're smart, then you're probably Asian. If you're gay, then you're brave, all of that I'm okay with. But if you're white, the stereotype is you are a racist. Blaming capitalism like that's the reason things are tough. While you tweet from an iPhone and sip on a Starbucks. You're supporting what you stand against, you don't think you are, but a Percocet addict don't donate money to pharma. Damn dog, we're all afraid to speak the truth. And the more afraid we get, the more we hate the ones who do. You're ashamed to be American? Okay, that's cool. Cause honestly, we are all ashamed of you too.
Y'all are so fake. Oh no. The forecast said that there'd be snowflakes. Whoa. You can make us see it your way. No way. Gasoline and propane. More flames. Oh no. No more snowflakes. snowflakes.
We can all get along, but there's no stopping. Ay, everybody's wrong, that's the real problem. Ay, they don't wanna hear it, but they still talking. Ay, soon enough, we running out of options. Ay, this ain't gonna end till it's in the coffin. Ay, we ain't gonna be friends till we try to squash it. Ay, I don't know how we can make amends or we drop it. Snowflakes melt when it's hot, kid.
Y'all are so fake, oh no. The forecast said that there'd be snowflakes. Whoa, you can make us see it.